In the vast wind-swept plains of Montana in 1885, a quiet woman married the man she had sworn to kill slowly, and he knew her deadly secret from the very night they met. The cold wind howled across the endless sea of golden grass and sagebrush, carrying whispers of pain and secrets yet to be revealed. Elias Kane stood tall and motionless on the wide wooden porch of his sprawling ranch house, his broad shoulders squared against the world. At 38 years old, his face was weathered and hard like carved stone, with deep lines around his sharp blue eyes from years of back-breaking work, lonely winters, and silent regrets. He had built this huge ranch with nothing but his own 2 hands, raising hundreds of cattle, breaking wild mustangs, repairing fences in blinding snowstorms, and fighting off cattle rustlers and harsh droughts. But the new government law was heartless. No man could own so much land without a wife and children. If he stayed single, the bank and federal agents would seize everything he had sacrificed his youth for. That same dusty, sun-baked afternoon, the stagecoach rolled into the small frontier town with a loud creak of wheels and tired horses. Mary stepped down carefully, holding a small, worn bag that contained all her belongings. She wore a plain gray dress, faded from many washes, and her dark hair was tied back tightly under a simple bonnet. Her face looked calm and almost softly beautiful in the golden light, but her deep brown eyes held a cold, burning anger that lived inside her like a hidden fire for 15 long years. She had answered Elias's newspaper advertisement for a wife only for one reason. It was the perfect chance to get close to the man she believed had destroyed her life. They spoke barely 10 words to each other. Inside the small wooden church that smelled of pine, candle smoke, and old hymn books, the elderly priest with trembling hands asked the simple question. Both answered, "I do," in flat, empty voices. There was no kiss, no warm embrace, no joyful tears from family or friends, just 2 cold signatures on yellowed papers. That evening, they rode back to the ranch house together in silence, under a sky blazing with thousands of cold, distant stars that seemed to watch them like silent judges. Mary's heart pounded like war drums in her chest as she stood in the dimly lit main room and watched Elias pour himself a tall glass of amber whiskey by the crackling stone fireplace. Her fingers trembled slightly as she remembered the small packet of white arsenic powder hidden safely in the folds of her dress. 15 years earlier, on a dark and stormy night, filled with thunder, lightning, and pouring rain, a gang of armed men had smashed into her family's cozy little cabin on the edge of the forest. She had been 16 then. Terrified, she had hidden under the loose floorboards, pressing her mouth over her hands to stop from screaming, while hot tears ran down her face. She heard every horrifying sound, her gentle mother's desperate cries, her strong father's shouts as he tried to protect them, and her little 10-year-old brother's terrified voice calling out her name before the gunshots ended everything. One of the killers had laughed loudly and pulled out a shiny silver pocket watch. Its loud, steady ticking had cut through the sudden, deadly silence like a cruel heartbeat. That sound had haunted Mary's nightmares every single night. Just yesterday, when Elias had bent down in the barn to pick up a fallen tool, Mary had seen that exact same silver pocket watch gleaming inside his coat pocket. In that frozen moment, Her blood turned to ice and her hatred flared brighter than ever. He was the killer. Tonight, her long-planned revenge would quietly begin. While Elias was outside in the cold darkness, checking the horses and locking the barn doors against the biting wind, Mary moved quickly. With steady but nervous hands, she mixed a small but deadly amount of the fine white arsenic powder into the whiskey bottle, stirring it carefully so it would not be noticed, just enough to make him grow sick slowly, day after day, painful enough to match the suffering her family had endured. When Elias came back inside, stomping dirt from his heavy boots, he poured a glass and drank it down in one long swallow. Mary sat quietly in the shadowed corner, her hands folded tightly, watching him with cold, bitter satisfaction. This is for my mother's final scream. This is for my father's blood on the floor. This is for my little brother's innocent face. You will pay slowly, Elias Kane. The first few weeks passed in a strange, surface-level peace. Mary woke early every morning to cook hearty breakfasts, warm bread, eggs, bacon, and strong coffee. She kept the large house spotlessly clean, tended the vegetable garden, fed the chickens, and hung laundry on the line where it flapped in the prairie wind. Townspeople who visited said the new Mrs. Kane was quiet, polite, and a hard worker. But every evening, as the sun painted the mountains in fiery orange and deep red, Mary's stomach tightened. She waited and watched as Elias sat by the fire, drank his whiskey, and slowly, quietly began to weaken. Still, small things started to trouble her deeply and chip away at her certainty. One misty early morning, with the sky turning soft pink, Mary peeked into the big barn and saw Elias sitting on a stool. His large, rough, calloused hands that looked like they could break rocks, were carving a small wooden horse with surprising care and patience. He sanded every curve gently so the toy would be smooth and safe. Later she learned he had made it for little Tommy, the orphan boy who lived with the poor widow a few miles down the road. Elias never told anyone. He simply left the finished toy on the doorstep at night and rode away without waiting for thanks. Another warm afternoon, Mary followed him secretly into town, hiding behind wagons and buildings. She watched from afar how Elias quietly paid off the entire heavy bank debt of old Mrs. Harper, a frail widow whose small farm was about to be seized. The old woman cried with gratitude and tried to hug him, but Elias only shook his head, refused to give his name, and walked away quickly, looking uncomfortable with any praise. At night, when the house grew quiet and the only sounds were crickets and distant coyote howls, Mary noticed even more. Elias never entered the main bedroom. Every night he slept alone on the old lumpy couch in the front room, leaving her the big, comfortable bed with fresh sheets. He spoke very little, but his deep voice was always kind. "The work was hard today, Mary. Take tomorrow easy," he said softly one evening when he saw her tired face. His shoulders always seemed weighed down, as if an invisible burden of guilt pressed on him constantly. Slowly the poison took hold. Elias grew noticeably thinner. His once powerful body weakened. His hands shook when he lifted the glass. Dark circles formed under his eyes. He coughed more and sometimes had to sit down suddenly because the room spun. Yet every single night, without missing once, he still drank the whiskey Mary had poisoned. She told herself she was winning, but inside her heart felt heavier with every passing day, filled with growing doubt and unwanted confusion. Then came the freezing December night when the truth finally broke through like lightning. Elias lay in the big bed burning with dangerous fever. Sweat covered his pale, sunken face. His breathing was rapid and labored, each breath sounding painful. Mary sat beside him, gently pressing a cool, wet cloth to his forehead, playing the role of caring wife. Suddenly, in his fever, his eyes opened and he began to speak in a weak, broken whisper. "I wasn't the one who wanted to kill your family," he gasped. "The corrupt sheriff held a gun to my head that night and forced me to fire. The real monster was Vance and his gang. They killed for sport and money. For 15 years I've hunted them, one by one, trying to atone for the blood I was forced to spill." Mary's world shattered. Tears she had buried for 15 years flooded her eyes. The man she had hated night after night had not been the main killer. He had been forced, and he had spent years secretly destroying the gang that murdered her loved ones. The next morning, while he slept, Mary searched the house. She found the silver watch and understood it was kept as proof. Then she discovered the hidden chest under the bed. Inside were her mother's silver locket, her brother's beloved wooden train, and her father's old Bible, all quietly bought back by Elias over the years. But the journal destroyed her completely. In his own handwriting, Elias had written, "She poisons my whiskey every night. I know the taste. I drink it anyway, because it comes from her. If my suffering brings her peace, I accept it gladly. She has suffered enough because of me." Mary collapsed to the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. The man she had hated knew everything. He had given her his entire ranch, his land, and his life, willingly drinking poison because he loved her enough to let her have her revenge. Before she could beg her forgiveness, Vance and his gang attacked at sunset. Guns roared, bullets flew. Elias, already dying from poison, fought like a lion to save her. "Run, Mary," he shouted, pushing her onto the horse. She rode a short way, then returned and hid, watching in horror and love as he battled despite his wounds. He killed them one by one, finally driving his knife into Vance himself. When the fighting ended, Mary ran to him and cradled his head in her lap. Blood soaked the ground. "I'm sorry, I was so wrong," she wept. Elias touched her cheek with a bloody hand and smiled faintly. "You were my forgiveness, my love. The whiskey was sweet because it came from you." His eyes closed forever under the glowing Montana sunset. Mary held him as the stars came out, her heart broken beyond repair. In the years that followed, she ran the ranch with kindness, helping others the way Elias once did. Every evening she sat on the porch, holding the silver watch, whispering thanks into the wind. She had gained everything: land, justice, memories. But she had lost the only man who had ever loved her so completely and selflessly that he chose to die so she could live in peace. That silent, tragic love stayed with her forever, as deep and endless as the Montana sky itself. Thank you for riding along on this story. Drop your location and time one more time if you'd like. And if it touched you, like, send some stars, follow, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. See you in the next tale.